Welcome to Seacoast Stories, a podcast about the people, businesses, and newsmakers that make the Seacoast an American hidden gem. I'm Troy Farkas, and on today's episode, my conversation with Max Pruna, the affable owner of La Mulita, a specialty coffee shop in Rye. Amidst a sea of Seacoast coffee shops, La Mulita stands out for its dedication to Colombian coffee. In Colombia, coffee is everything. It's one of their top exports, and Max, as a little boy in the city of Medellin, started his addiction early. He loaded his morning and afternoon cups with cream and sugar, which, today, makes him cringe. Because at La Mulita, it is all about quality. And that's thanks to Boston's George Howell, one of the godfathers of specialty coffee, who took Max under his wing a decade ago. You'll hear that incredible story later in the show. And you'll also learn why coffee is more popular than ever and how the rising demand for it is leading to a global crisis, which has, unfortunately, hurt the La Mulita business. Today's show is presented by Kim Vargo and Sage Interior Design, an episode where Max also gives some home brewing advice. Plus, he takes us inside the immigration process, which leads us to the start of this conversation when, in 1999, Max wanted to leave Colombia to escape Medellin, which had been overtaken by one of the most notorious criminals of all time.
Those 90s were very tumultuous years for Colombia in the sense that the years when a very famous drug lord was alive in Colombia named Pablo Escobar. And this person lived in the city I grew up in, which is Medellin. So he was someone who very violent, was very encouraged to do crazy stuff within the city and the country. Yeah, and I'll bring it close to me, how close it got to me. So not only the government was going after him, but there was another group called Los Pepes, which was this group that wanted to kill Pablo Escobar and anyone who was related to him. So this group of Los Pepes, based out of Medellin, decided, okay, in order to get Pablo Escobar to come out from wherever he's hiding, the best way to approach this is let's go after any family member or any friend or any person who's related to him. Certainly, at the time, my parents were living in a place, in an apartment building on the 18th floor, and we didn't know that the next building to their side was where Pablo Escobar's mom was living. And so this group of Los Pepes decided to plant a car bomb in between the two buildings, my parents' building and the Pablo Escobar's mom's building. I was not home at the time. At the time I was living with my parents. I was watching the news at my girlfriend's house when I see breaking news, car bomb just exploded in Medellin. And when I'm seeing the screen and I'm seeing my parents' building where the bomb had just exploded, I'm like, oh my God. Certainly at that time, there were no cell phones. So the reaction I had was I need to go there. So I drove to the site. It was fully protected by the police, so I had to leave my car, walk all the way up to the apartment building. The elevators had been damaged, so now I had to go up the stairs 18 floors to see my parents. And when I got to the floor, they were safe at the moment, but when the bomb exploded, they were sleeping, and the drop ceiling just fell over their beds. And all the windows in our floor and all the buildings within the surrounding area, 3-mile radius, were all without any glass. So I can still recall sleeping for about 6 months without any glass. The windows were covered with plastic bags because there were no manufacturing company to generate so many windows for so many buildings. So those are the little things that really impacted me. And when I look back, probably part of the reason I ended up deciding to go to the U.S. and seek a master's degree, just trying to create a space and a moment for myself. I never thought I would end up living here all my life. The intention was more, okay, I'm looking back of those events. My parents almost got killed. I've seen friends who've suffered consequences because of Pablo Escobar. I just want to escape a little bit of Medellin and explore something different. And so that's part of how I came to New Hampshire. So
How scary was it under those circumstances on a day-to-day basis? I mean, you and your friends had to schedule your hangouts around these circumstances.
Yeah, now that you mentioned that, because there was so much violence, Pablo Escobar was a guy who decided that putting bombs was a way that he could threaten the government and make people be scared of him. So our parents certainly were worried that we could be killed if we were in a bar, just hanging out. And the government itself had regulations saying, okay, we don't want more people to get killed, so we'll put a time limit as to when people can be outside on the streets. So I think at the time it was no more than 11 at night or 12 at night. No one could be on the streets. Now, if you're a teenager where you want to be partying, when they put that timing to be home, you're like, that's when the party's just starting, right? So I remember with my friends, we would all decide where our party was going to be extended at. So we would decide if it was my house or a friend's house, we would go at 11 or 12 and just say, okay, we're going to party there and we're going to sleep all there. So that way we would be safe. Our parents knew where we would be hanging out, but we could party as teenagers. And you're pretty sure no one who's listening to this podcast has experienced that. And that has dramatic impact in the way you see life and the way you want to experience life. And I think those are part of the reasons that I wanted to get out a little bit and explore the world. So I said at that moment to my parents, you know what? I would love to see if I have an opportunity that you guys allow me to go to the U.S. and after I finish college and expand my opportunity of getting engaged into a master's degree. And so I wanted to get away from Colombia and experience another country, practice my English, even though I studied in a bilingual school, but nothing better than living in a country that you can speak it all day long. And to expand my knowledge or my education furthermore. So going to that year of 99, I'm graduating. My girlfriend, nowadays my wife, she's my high school sweetheart. I didn't want to leave the country without her, so I proposed to her. And I said, why don't we get married and go and live to the U.S. and do a master's degree. And I was happy to see her say yes and join me in this journey to come to the U.S. Now you might say, why did you land it in New Hampshire? So the reason at the time is we applied to several colleges, and the only two states in the U.S. that granted us a yes were Southern New Hampshire University here in Manchester City, and the other one was in Phoenix. But I decided to choose New Hampshire because I had one relative who was going to Southern New Hampshire University.
Okay, because I'm about to say, most people would choose the obvious choice, and it's not New Hampshire.
Exactly. Nor when I landed on a February in what I would call full winters in New Hampshire back then, which were really snowy and cold. And I landed to Manchester on a February to go to study to my master's degree back then.
So when you made the decision to come here to New Hampshire, I'm just wondering, what was your perception or knowledge of New Hampshire before you decided to attend school here?
Well, let's put it in perspective. Back then, you didn't have internet. I remember in college just going to the library to get access to what they call internet back then. And it was limited by time to get access to that computer that could get you into internet to watch things around the world. So I had no idea of what I was going to be experiencing in New Hampshire other than a call or two to my cousin who was already here and saying, it's a beautiful place, you're going to love it here. But I guess I was young and I didn't explore that much into it. And I'm glad I didn't, because maybe I would have been scared to come here because of the cold. But I'm glad I didn't ask too many questions. But I was excited that I was being accepted for a master's degree. And I always thought I was going to come back to Colombia. I said to my wife, let's go for 2 years. Let's go and do our master's degree, maybe have an internship, and then we'll come back. That'll open doors for us here in Colombia because we already went to the US. We have a master's degree. We are bilingual. And I'm pretty sure that will come handy by the time we come back to Colombia. It's 25 years after and we're still here. But those were the original plans back then.
Why did you stay?
Yeah, so through that master's degree, you have an opportunity to do an internship. Both me and my wife applied for internship, and we got lucky. I mean, I got mine in a local company in Nashville, and my wife had one in Massachusetts. Now, she was doing her internship, decided to hire her full-time. And then through my internship, I got a connection to another company in Boston called Pyramid Research, who offered me possibilities for a full-time job. So here you are, almost finished with your master's degree and being granted an opportunity to extend your time working here and having a full-time job. And because at the time back then, you were allowed that after you finish your master's, you could stay in the U.S. working for 3 years.
On a visa?
On a visa, on a working visa. And so my wife and I decided, well, why don't we do 3 years of working visa experience? That would be even better by the time we go back to Colombia. So that's how it started.
And were you two married at this point?
Yeah, I forgot to mention that, but yeah, before
you married in Colombia?
In Colombia,
okay.
Yeah. 5 weeks before graduation of college, we got married. And after getting married, 2 weeks after, we were here in the U.S. So all our honeymoon was in New Hampshire.
Nice.
No, I should say we did go to a Caribbean island before then, but I call it the first 2 years of marriage. I call it a honeymoon, and we were here, and it was a great experience because you were away of your family members and you were having a great new experience. So
yeah, Manchester is very romantic.
At the time, it was more romantic. Let's put it that way. No, but we had a great time, and it was a great time for us to bond as a couple now. And if I could go back, I would do it in a heartbeat. We had a great time back then.
Okay, so you two took the opportunity to stay for the 3 years.
Yep.
And you obviously stayed beyond then. So how did that come about?
Yeah, so what happened is you get a 3-year working visa that could be extended for another 3-year working visa for a total of 6. 6 is the limit of working visa, or back then it was. And my wife's company decided to leave her 3 more years. And I stayed in the company I was working for about another year, and then I switched. But anyhow, the whole trajectory was a total of 6 years under a working visa. During almost when that was about to expire, the company of my wife decided to sponsor her for a green card, and that automatically applies to the husband as well. So now we both had green cards.
Okay. They don't have to sponsor the visa?
They do.
They do, okay.
It has to be the employer who sponsors the visa, not I want green card. No, it doesn't work that way. It has to be the employer who sponsors the green card.
And sponsoring the green card, I assume, is more expensive than sponsoring the visa?
Yes, and there's a limit for the visa. So the visa can only be extended up to 6 years total, 3 and 3. So after that, you either go back home or that's it, unless the employer sponsors a green card, which allows you to stand for a more extended period.
Gotcha.
And as a green card holder, after 5 years, you can then apply for citizenship.
Okay.
And that's...
So she got the green card offer, and you being married, you automatically get the green card as well.
Exactly.
Okay. Was that stressful at all? Were there ever any times of uneasiness? Like, are we going to be able to stay here, or are we going to go back?
Yeah, those are very stressful moments because, for one, if you're enjoying what you're doing, which we were at the time, we were like having a new opportunity in the U.S., being told, okay, you got to pack and go back, you're always thinking, what if the employer is going to just lay me off? And then you automatically have to go back. So you're always not unsure what's going to happen the next day. If you're going to wake up and there's a big layoff or the company shuts down, because my wife was working in a startup. So all that journey for her was super stressful because the employer all of a sudden could say, we ran out of funds, we're closing. And that will put us in an airplane going back home. So yeah, very stressful years, I would call. We would keep a calendar of everything, like dates that were important for us. And once we were into the green card, then we were in a more safer spot because now you were legally granted to stay in the U.S. You could work anywhere. Now you were not married to one employer. You could work with anyone else. Under the working visa, you could only work for the sponsor of the visa, which was that employer. So yeah, to your point, yeah, stressful moments those first 5 years. Were
you getting homesick at all?
Yeah, many times. I mean, I still get sometimes homesick, but yeah, back then even more because I had a very close knit of friends. I still hold a group chat with all my classmates of school. That's how close we are, and my wife as well. And so that was something I missed a lot aside from my parents and my family, a very extended family that gets all together in Christmas because we all live in the same city. So those moments of gathering family, hang out with a bunch of friends from school and college, we miss that a lot, combined with the food, which is still the case. We don't find Colombian food around here. So that's always been a challenge. So that's what gets you most of the time kind of homesick.
Well, maybe that's your next business venture.
I don't know if I need more, but yeah, we'll put it out there.
Okay, so back to business. You were working at a place called Pyramid Research in Boston, later MetLife Insurance and several other reputable corporate gigs. But it's my understanding that you weren't necessarily feeling this or pleased with this path. And so you had started pursuing some other things on the side.
Being here, we loved. On the working side, probably I was not being true to myself and I was not happy with what I was doing. So after years being in the workforce, well, let's back up a little bit here because there's a very important point here to highlight. And I'll bring it back all the way back to Colombia. My dad, through the years, after working as a salesman for a manufacturing company, on the side decided to start investing in real estate. So my teenage years, I grew up learning about my dad investing in real estate, mostly in industrial warehouses in Colombia, in Medellin, where he would buy a lot, build a warehouse, and rent it to a manufacturing company. So I was kind of learning about this through him. And in summers, some summers, they would send me to Miami, to my uncle's house to help him with his business. And he was a flipper of properties. So he would buy distressed property and rip the carpets and this and that and turn it into a beautiful home and sell it. So I was the free labor in summer to go there and help him out on the business. So from him, I also learned a ton. So in my mind, I was thinking more back then, how could I do that in Colombia? Those were my thoughts back then, more so than maybe doing it in the US someday. But now going back here, I forgot to mention that when we got full-time jobs in Boston, we had no kids. And it was me and my wife. So we pretty much could live in one income back then. Instead of renting, we bought ourselves a little condo. We painted the place. We changed the carpet. So we updated the property just like a fixer-upper in Manchester.
Okay.
Yeah. And so this was early 2002. And we kept doing it. Like every savings we would have, we would invest into a little condo and we would move into it, clean it up, put it nicely, and then sell it. And we started building some equity that way. That later on turned into multifamilies and to commercial buildings. So in other words, I was having a parallel of a professional life, and on the sidelines, our hustle was kind of doing flips.
Okay. With the hope of course, turning profits, but also maybe I can make this my career one day so I can leave this other stuff that's not as fun?
Yeah, I think eventually that was the plan. But yeah, we kept on working for about, in my case, about 10 years or 12 years, I think it was. But all through that journey, we were investing on the side. But the time came where I needed to be true to myself. And I knew deep in my heart, because I was so in Colombia as well, I was an entrepreneur by heart. And it was that I just noticed that in the US. No, I had small businesses in Colombia. None of them successful, but I was always doing some entrepreneurial idea. I just learned by those little mistakes. They were not huge monetary mistakes, but I learned that that's what really drove me, was being an entrepreneur. But I guess because my parents had invested so much in me, I had to kind of follow that path of professional employee at the time.
Now, I want to, skip ahead a few years. I also do want to say you worked at MetLife too, which is a big company as well, which is pretty cool. So good for the resume. Tell me your George Howell story.
Oh, yes.
First explain who he is and then tell the story.
Yeah, I think that's the connection with coffee. So all through the years, I've been drinking coffee, and I had met this girl who worked at Northeastern University, and she was in charge of putting a panel of group of people to talk to the students on different topics. But this specific year, she decided to invite coffee roasters and chocolatiers to come and speak to the students of Northeastern University about their coffee journey or chocolatier journey. But she knew how much I love coffee. So she said, Max, why don't you come? We have a panel of speakers that are well known in coffee, and I know you love coffee. I think you will really enjoy this presentation. So the first one I attended was George Howell. And I had no idea who George Howell was at the time. He's a legend in specialty coffee, but I show up.
And a legend in Boston too, right? He's from there.
He's from Boston,
right.
Correct. And so I go to Northeastern University and I'm there. George Howell is in the audience and the presentation starts. And he starts relating the whole coffee journey of how he started exploring why coffee at the time was not focusing quality. It was more of a commodity. It was just a bunch of coffee, but no way to control quality. So he was one of the founding members that started this new trend of creating what we call nowadays specialty coffee. And is based on the fact that if you can find a way that the farmers focus on quality processes, which includes not only on the picking of the coffee cherry, but the right amount of sugars, the size of the bean, blah, 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 a bunch of items, then the end result will be that the end consumer will have a very good cup of coffee, superb and unique flavors. Anyhow, so he's relating all his coffee journey, what he tried to do with the coffee farmers, then how he expanded his business in Boston. So back in the 90s, he grew his coffee business, which at the time was called Coffee Connection, from one store to 12 stores and a coffee roastery, and all within Boston.
Wow. Okay. This is revolutionary in New England in the 90s. No one is doing this. It's my understanding in Portland, Oregon, and Seattle, this is happening.
Correct.
On the West Coast, but on the East Coast, not at all.
Not at all. Correct. To your point, so Starbucks back then was just growing in the West Coast, and they were already looking into growing in the East Coast. So George mentioned that as they're looking into the East Coast, they look at the big cities like New York and Boston. But looking at Boston specifically, they did the market research and they noticed, okay, George Howell is the biggest guy in town. He has 12 stores and a coffee roastery. Let's go and approach him with an offer. If he doesn't like the offer, then we're going to compete with him heavily. So they put in front of him an offer he pretty much couldn't refuse, and he accepted the offer. So he sold his business, Coffee Connection, to Starbucks, and he had to sign a non-competitive clause for 10 years. So that meant that George Howell could only be involved offering consulting work to other smaller roasteries and coffee farmers, but he had to be completely out of the business.
Now, when you say he sold his business to them, do you mean all the Coffee Connections locations became Starbucks?
Correct.
Okay. It wasn't like they were taking his recipes and...
Correct. Well, what they did take was, and believe it or not, George Howell was the creator of the Frappuccino we know nowadays.
Wow.
George Howell had created that beverage and he sold it through his different coffee shops, and it was one of the most demanded drinks. Now, when Starbucks grabbed it, the company, they own Frappuccino. Howard Schultz at the time didn't believe in that drink.
The founder of Starbucks.
The founder of Starbucks. But after seeing all the people demanding the drink in Boston, he said, well, maybe we can bottle this drink instead of just selling it at the coffee shops.
And they were heavily competing with Dunkin' Donuts at that time as well.
Correct. So then he was smart because he went then to the CEO of Pepsi-Cola. He first went to Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola said, we're not interested. So he then went to Pepsi-Cola and said, look, I have this coffee-based drink. I think if we can do a joint venture and bottle this drink, we could do a great business. And Pepsi said, we're in. We'll go 50-50. And Pepsi started bottling Frappuccino, and that just blew off the charts. And that's what we know and see everywhere nowadays. But George Howell was the creator of that drink. Anyhow, so I'm hearing all this story and how he sold to Starbucks and then waiting for 10 years and restarting all over again. And he started nowadays with his own name. It's called George Howell Coffee. And now he has now 4 stores in Boston and a roastery. But he was relating all this coffee journey. I'm fascinated. But then he said, okay, now it's time to try my coffee. Anyone who drinks cream or sugar, I'm sorry, but my coffee's only black. We're going to try it just black. I'm like, oh, shit, it's going to be bitter. But then I had never seen a Chemex back then, which is a brewing device. So his baristas and himself are preparing different Chemexes there. And when I approached to try to taste the coffee, they gave me the cup and they said, well, this coffee's from Colombia and it has a very sweet flavor. So I'm hearing all this and I took a sip of that and I was like blown away. I was like, oh my God. Is this real coffee? I mean, I was experiencing a completely different taste to coffee. So I was so blown away. I then went to George Howell and I said, George, I'm from Colombia and I've never had a coffee like this in my life. And I thought I knew Colombian coffee. This is insane. And so he said, well, Max, that's specialty coffee. And I'm like, well, I want to learn more what it entails. I mean, how do I learn more about this? So he said, look, Max, it's a long journey. Lots of things to learn. Why don't you start with this couple of books? So he referenced a couple of books for me to read. And he did invite me to his public sessions at his store where they have a table and you can go and cup coffees with him at the time or the baristas at the time. And I took advantage of that. And that was the starting of this rabbit hole for me. I started now driving all the way to Boston to attend those cupping sessions, getting the books he referenced, started reading. And now every time I start going back to Colombia to visit my parents, I took an opportunity to go and visit the farms to proximity to Medellin and learn about the coffee farm process. And so that was the initial phase of this interest of mine for coffee.
Now, is your motivation for learning all of this rooted in, I want to become the best home barista there's ever been, and I just want to drink really good coffee? Or is it, oh, wait, there might be a business opportunity here?
Yeah, I think I saw it as a business opportunity because at the time I was looking around here and I'm like, okay, and I have to point at the time I was already living in the Seacoast.
This is like mid 2010s?
Yeah, well, it's more like 2014, 2015, roughly. And forget Profile, if what year they opened. That was probably the only first specialty coffee shop around here back in the day, but there was nothing else. And I'm looking at what George Howell is doing in Boston and what I'm tasting. I'm like, how great could that be if that was in New Hampshire? So I'm definitely seeing it as an opportunity, but because you don't know the subject, I mean, I didn't know what a roaster was. I didn't know how to make a proper espresso or how to manage an espresso machine. So there was so much to learn.
There's so many methods. So many different grinds. There's so much. Like I've gone down the rabbit holes before because I also love coffee, but every time I go down the rabbit hole, I'm just overwhelmed with the sheer amount there is to learn. It
can be overwhelming for sure. But I took it slow paced and I think I did do something to kind of gain some knowledge from others was start an Instagram account, which I called back in the day Roaster's Craft, is still present on Instagram. And the intention of it was, okay, let me approach by learning from others. So what I did, I would highlight different roasteries on that Instagram account and then funnel them into a website where people could buy that coffee from that roaster through my site. So I was pretty much trying to create business for the roastery through my Instagram and website, and also bring consumers to taste different coffees from different roasters nationwide. So that gave me an opportunity to learn from, hey, how is this roastery from Seattle roasting their coffee, and taste that coffee from Colombia or Guatemala. And so it's like cupping by myself at home. and trying. And then at the same time, selling it to consumers and getting their input of what they thought about that coffee. So it kind of gave me a perspective of knowledge of like, okay, how are these roasters approaching the coffee, tasting what they're roasting, and then seeing how the consumer, which coffees they like and dislike. So those were my initial stepping stones into this idea of getting into the business.
And you also started a podcast during this time, right?
Yeah, that's a crazy story. Yeah. So that's prior
before
to this.
podcasts had really taken off.
Yeah. So I was in this transition of looking for different ideas. So before this coffee idea, doing real estate full time, I was listening to podcasts as I was doing flips of property. All the time I was listening to podcasts. And at the time, my favorite podcast was Entrepreneur on Fire from John Lee Dumas. And I saw this guy was insane. He was doing 5 podcasts a day. And that made him unique because no one else was doing that. But that attracted me so much because I was always looking for content to listen to every day, either because I was jogging or because I was working. And I was a heavy consumer of podcasts back then. But one day I decided to do a search on podcasts. Is there anything like John Lee Dumas in Spanish? And there was none. I'm like, maybe there's an idea here, another idea. And so I started researching and no one was doing a podcast in Spanish about successful entrepreneurs. So I'm like, what if I try that? One, I would learn from entrepreneurs. It would be cool to make new connections and then bring it out to the whole community, Spanish-speaking community. So I set myself here in town, a podcast setting, not as high technology like yours, but something that I could record. Probably was the worst microphones back then, but it was fascinating. I got to do 150 interviews of 150 successful entrepreneurs worldwide in Spanish.
And your show was far more successful than this one will ever be. No. You told me the numbers, pretty crazy.
Sometimes it's the early wave that gives you some luck on that end. But
right place, right time. What were some from the Spanish entrepreneurs that you were interviewing? As you look back on those 150 conversations, what were some of the biggest lessons you learned about entrepreneurship?
One is being patient on your idea or concept. I think entrepreneurs, or me properly, I like to see success too fast, and you got to be patient for things to develop, and accept the moments where you're not succeeding. Like, I sometimes even struggle nowadays with a business. Sometimes when you have a low sales day, I still struggle, but you shouldn't be looking at that day. You should be looking at the whole year and the whole picture.
So it's not the end of the world with one bad day.
Exactly. It's not the number of downloads of days. You got to see the whole picture of the year. And it's learning to be on that mindset of being a full glass, not half empty glass, always positive. And if you feed yourself with that mindset, things evolve and grow and become, it's like a community. I remember the days when I opened this business, you could hear crickets here. I would spend an hour and a half talking to one customer just to keep him inside, and a car to be out there to see if the second one would roll in, because no one would come here. And it's patient. It took 3 years to then suddenly see cars rolling into this place. But initially it was one car, probably 2 cars, 4 hours I was here. It was crazy back then. So probably one of the biggest lessons for me is being patient on any idea or concept you're trying to do. Is just give it time. Just like a plant, you got to feed it until it gives you coffee, a fruit of coffee, or the proper fruit.
Coming up, the real reason Max opened La Mulita, and inside the town politics that nearly stopped Max from opening the shop at all. That's in a moment. But first, just before Art Round Town last Friday, I stopped in to an adorable store on Deer Street in Portsmouth. Emily, at the front desk of this store, then showed me around Sage, an interior design studio that's recently come here from Newburyport. Sage is filled with all sorts of artisanal home goods, plants, custom-made furniture, and it's also designed like the most welcoming living room you've ever stepped into. I, being a huge candle guy, immediately went for the candles, and I narrowed down to 2 choices before realizing, wait, rather than choose one, I can just get them both. And so I did, with the help of the 10% discount you can use at Sage. Whether you're dreaming of modern coastal living, a laid-back sanctuary to unwind in, or bringing West Coast flavor to the East Coast, Sage is here to turn your vision into reality. And over the next 2 weeks, when you go to checkout at Sage, you can tell them Seacoast Stories sent you so that you can get 10% off your next purchase. Like me, with my sea salt and coconut candles, Sage is here to help remind you of summer, no matter what time of year it is. Someone who's also here to help you is friend of the show, Kim Vargo. As the mom of twin toddlers, she knows a thing or two about being overwhelmed, which is why she's the perfect person to help you deal with the overwhelm in your life. With expertise in programs like Dubsado and Honeybook, Kim helps create efficient systems so you can ditch those time-sucking admin tasks that you hate, like organizing inquiries or sending contracts, those things that you dislike more than sitting in Islington Street traffic, which I hear is starting up again, and I'm pretty upset about it. Why do they need to keep doing that? Anyways, in virtual one-on-one sessions, Kim takes the time to understand your business and your specific needs so that she can then figure out how to find you more of the one thing that we all need more of, time. If you want to get your time back so you can focus on creating meaningful things again, then please visit kimvargo.com/contact. In the message box, just tell her that Seacoast Stories sent you for a free call and a custom discount tailored to your business needs. Speaking of business, let's return to my conversation with Max Pruna, who takes us back to the moment he decided to open La Mulita.
So after this exploration with the Roasters Craft website or concept, I started to see, okay, most of these roasters are doing coffees from all parts of the world. Here I am in this unique position of being in a state that is pretty much without too much specialty coffee being offered, for one. Two, I go to Colombia every year to visit my parents, so I have access to develop connections and relationships with coffee farmers in Colombia. And two, I'm living in a community where I could be differentiating myself with a product no one else is doing, which is focus only on Colombian coffee. So I thought, the more I thought about that idea, the more it grew in me. It's like being authentic from where I'm coming from, but where I'm living now. So I come from Colombia. Now I'm living in the US and I live in this beautiful community. How great could I be of combining those two worlds? So that grew in me more and more. And I shared it with my wife and she thought it was a great idea, thank God. And I think the biggest challenge I faced with that idea and concept is that I wanted to be a roaster from the start. Now you could start that idea as a coffee shop only and buy coffee from someone else from Colombia, but I wouldn't be the one roasting the product. But I really want to put my fingerprint on the product that I was selling. So I decided I'm going to put all my savings into the roaster.
The actual machine.
The machine,
okay.
Correct. And so that involved not only saving for the machine, but finding a place that would allow you to roast. And even though I had been into real estate, I never had envisioned that it would be so hard to find a location that is approved by the city to roast coffee, because roasting coffee is seen as a manufacturing process. So in order to be approved on a site to do that, it has to be zoned as commercial zone. My main focus initially was I want to be in Portsmouth because at the time Breaking New Grounds was open. Right in the middle of Portsmouth, and there's only one other roaster
Port
there.
City, White Heron in the West End.
Yes, but German place, Von Solen. Those were the only in the local central part of Portsmouth. That's where I wanted to be. But the more I investigated, they're like, you can't roast in downtown. Those people are grandfathered. You can't do it here. So then I asked, where can I do it? And they said, well, it has to be on the West End. And as you probably know, even though there were some spots vacant back then, they were not really appealing locations to start the business, nor was it affordable to start the business. So I was about to give up at that time. It was probably 8 or a year searching for a space in Portsmouth. I knocked a lot of doors. I was this close of taking a space close to Loaded Question, which was the only place that was allowing for roasting back then. But I'm glad I didn't. I mean, we won't go into details, but the landlord there at the time, not the current one, but the prior one was not the greatest. So thank God I didn't take that space. And there probably was a reason I ended up in the best place that I am today.
So how did you end up here? Just outside of Portsmouth.
Yeah. So I'm driving my kids. They were at the time going to Rye Junior High, and I'm driving down Sagamore, and I'm approaching here the Rotary where Atlantic Grill is. When I look to the right and I see a little for rent sign attached to the door, the glass door, and I'm like, oh God. So I went all the way down, dropped my kids, and I came back, stopped in the parking lot, took the note of the number, immediately called. The guy answered. I'm like, hey, I see a for rent sign here. I'm really interested in taking a place, look at the place. And he said, absolutely. I'll meet you there in a few minutes. He showed up. We walk in, and back in the day, this place had been the warehouse of the flooring business, which was on the other side of this wall. And it was a mess. But because I had done real estate, I could see the potential of the space. But most importantly, while he was coming here to show it to me, I immediately logged in to Rye to see on the website what kind of zone were we in. But I could sense that if Seaport Fish was here and Atlantic Grill, this potentially was a commercial zone. And it was. And I was like, oh my God, this is the place. So I told the landlord, look, I'm really interested. I'm going to go and talk to the town. The next day I was in town. I was asking the building inspector, look, I'm looking to do this concept. I know I need a commercial space. I see this is zoned as such. Can I do that? And he said, yeah, absolutely. The only thing is we don't have a health department, so you're going to have to deal all the permit process through Concord, which I'm like, okay, that's fine.
Oh.
Yeah, because Portsmouth has its own health department because it's bigger and has a lot of hospitality business. But Rye, it's a very small town. They have no health inspector. So I was dependent on Concord. So that meant I had to...
Portsmouth couldn't lend their health inspector? What?
Well, in a way, I'm glad they didn't. I'm glad they didn't because probably I wouldn't be open yet. So that started for me. I immediately put an offer after that. After finding I could do coffee roasting here, I put an offer to the landlord. I said, look, I want to lease the space. Boom, my process starts with the health department. And because I had limited funds to buy the roaster, I didn't have enough funds to have the espresso machine. I decided I would do with my hands all the counters and all the stuff you see here inside. So that was most of my work.
Wow. Okay. Now you started with just the roaster. Coffee equipment, very expensive. Roasters,
Very expensive.
thousands upon thousands of dollars. Ditto for espresso machine. So you did not start with an espresso machine.
No. Big mistake. I learned my lesson pretty quickly. I remember the opening day 4 months prior to COVID. And we opened the doors and all I had was drip coffee and some brewing devices, which at the time we had a V60 and a Chemex and an AeroPress. No food. That's all I offered. I was clueless at the time. I said, probably people are just going to come to my store and buy my coffee for home.
The beans.
The beans,
Yeah.
correct. The bags of beans and take home with them after they taste the coffee. But little did I know that in order for that to really happen, people have to come and enjoy your place, trust your product. And in US, it's not typical you go to a place and just drink coffee. You got to have pastries to go along with it. More than that, an espresso-based drink. People were asking for cappuccinos and lattes. And I'm like, no, I only have drip. So people were like kind of very disappointed. So that was a learning curve for me that pretty quickly I needed to correct.
Yeah. And we're sitting on a couch right now. There's a couple chairs. There's bags of coffee, which have become de facto chairs, but there's not that much in the way of seating. And as I'm sure you've picked up, people love to sit over their lattes and chit chat for a couple hours, or now in the age of remote work, open their laptops and plop down.
True. But I think the vision back then and the limitations I had with the health department. So the health department had only approved me as a coffee roastery, not as a coffee shop. Okay. So that meant I was a manufacturing company, and that required that I didn't have hangout spot for people to hang out. So that was intentionally done that way from the beginning, because the permit process of the health department required, okay, you can only have 8 seats. That's tops the amount of space you can have. Now, the burlap bags, even though they serve as decoration, serve as additional seating for them. But in the way the health department looks at it, it doesn't look like a seating arrangement for the people. So
Smart.
But later on, hopefully we'll have a bigger space with that in mind. But yeah, that was because of the permit process with the health department.
Okay. So you opened the storefront here in Rye, 2019. Fall 2019.
Yeah.
And it just so happens that in winter, early spring 2020, this whole COVID thing happens. And then that causes you guys, like all other businesses, to change course. So what happened?
Absolutely. So I'm 4 months into opening La Mulita. Hardly any souls coming in at the time. But anyhow, it was open. Boom, COVID hits. And I'm like, holy cow. Okay, so we're home.
What was your reaction when COVID hit, when you had just started this thing?
It's like I've put all my money, all my sweat to open as fast as I could, which still took me 9 months. And I just opened and now I have to shut down. And still the machine is not roasting. My doors are not open. I have invested in green coffee, which is sitting in the ground. What am I going to do? I mean, I have no one to share my brand with. So I was like facing this new reality of like, it was panic mode at the moment. But thankfully enough, with my wife, we're like, okay, what other ways can we explore to keep the business going? And one was certainly to focus on the website, but two was, okay, why don't you go to roast? I mean, you can roast by yourself at the space. And we start offering free delivery of coffee bags to anyone within 1 hour radius of the store. And I said, that way we keep the coffee rolling into the homes and our brand out there for people to be talking about. And I keep myself insane roasting coffee. So that was the approach, and I'm glad I did it. And man, did I drive miles that year, but in a way I wouldn't change that ever, because it not only gave me a chance to keep the business running and keep roasting and keep learning, but also my kids were teenagers back in the day and they were getting their driver license. So the idea was like, okay, they're going to learn how to drive with dad there. We were making the deliveries together. It gave me a chance to connect with them. So I have beautiful memories from those days.
Wow.
Funny enough. Yeah.
And that business did well?
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say it was profitable because the free delivery was a lot of miles.
Yeah.
But it kept the business running and kept me engaged, kept me learning about roasting. That was probably the time I learned the most how to roast, because I was by myself day in, day out, roasting by myself.
Right.
No one else around me but myself with a roaster. So yeah, I cherish those days as a learning opportunity for me on roasting.
Yeah. And with the whole reopening process, La Mulita being a place generally grab and go. Mm-hmm. So that worked to your benefit during those times.
It did work in my benefit. Yeah, for sure. Now, that time also gave me an opportunity to think about, even though we had only been in business for 4 months, what was good or bad during those 4 months that we could improve on by the time we were able to open again. And it was easy to conclude that I needed to engage some food or baked goods and an espresso machine. So we ended up offering bagels and scones from different local bakeries, roast foods with bagels, sourdough bagels, scones from Kate's Bakery, and Lovebird Donuts. So that was our combination. But that made the total difference in our business. Total difference. Now people started rolling in. And initially, we'd only get contractors who were going to their job site, grab a cup of coffee, drip coffee, and go. Now we were getting moms and kids and parents coming in, having a latte with a baked good. So now the clientele started growing and changing within the space.
Okay, so the coffee shop business isn't, a huge moneymaker. No one really gets rich in the coffee business. Yeah. So what were your big motivations once you had opened the store and gotten through COVID and expanded here? What was really keeping you so invested in this?
Honestly, it's twofold. One was the local community, how their reaction to the coffee, our coffee, they're like, oh my God, just the experience I had previously had with George Howell, I was seeing it in front of my eyes with the customers that were tasting our coffee. So that kept me so engaged because it was like opening their eyes to a new world with this coffee taste. And they're like, oh, Max, I've never tasted a coffee like this before. This is awesome. Just like I had experienced. So that every moment like that is like, oh my God, I got to show more people this. And so that kept me super engaged. The other part is that I'm able to help a Colombian coffee farmer, which is a place I was born at. And I know how hard they work. So I feel I'm their ambassador here in the US. And I have me and my team have a big responsibility of being proper ambassadors of those hardworking coffee farmers in Colombia. So it's a big responsibility and one that we don't take lightly. We work at it on every sequence of the chain, from the way we source that coffee to the way we roast that coffee to the way we grind and prepare our drinks. Every little step along the way has to be done with a lot of responsibility to properly be the ambassadors of that hardworking coffee farmer.
That is so cool. What is it like for you on maybe there's a slow day and you're behind the barista bar and you see some people here and they're enjoying their coffee and they're regulars, so you know about them and their stories and their families, and knowing every part of your story and where you've been, your journey to the United States, this idea that you wanted to have a Colombian coffee shop because nothing like that existed here. What comes to mind for you just as you have those moments of reflection when you're like, dang, I made this happen?
Yeah, I think making a dream come reality. I always dream of having my own business, but it's become even a better dream by seeing it transform our lives within the community. And what I mean by that is that this space allows people to connect. It's not only the product, it's the connections they make within the space that brings you so much joy. So, and I think this world, US and worldwide, we need more spaces like this, community spaces and places where people feel comfortable to come. They're safe. They're having a laugh. They're having a conversation. They're meeting for the first time, boyfriend or girlfriend. And so it's spaces like that. We all crave for that aside from our homes. And I think coffee shops have that opportunity to expand those connections within a community. And I'm glad we're one of many, because we have great community locations around, which you've highlighted many of them in your podcast. And I'm grateful that we're contributing to that. Those spaces are necessary for us all in the community to have, share, and enjoy. And so I'm lucky that I'm one of those hosting those kind of spaces.
Yes, I fully co-sign on that. It's so important to be often referred to a coffee shop as the third space, the place to hang out that's not home, that's not work, where you can connect and feel valued and be around like-minded people. So it's very cool that you are doing that. So you've had La Mulita now for, 6 years. I can't believe 2019 is 6 years ago.
Yeah.
What are the biggest lessons you've learned from running this business?
Wow. There's a lot, but let me focus on probably two. In a business of hospitality, your team and your community is the most important thing to take care of. I initially started thinking when I started the business, as long as you put a great product out there, that's all you need. No, it's more than that. Your team behind that bar is important because they are the ones who tend to guide not only your guest, but the vibe and the experience. And if they're not feeling comfortable in the environment they're working as a team and you guiding them, then they're not going to be expressing that to your guest. And the other thing is creating a space that is inviting for that community to gather, enjoy, and share with others. I can't tell you enough that our biggest marketing tool is our own guest. The word of mouth for us has been so powerful that I'm still amazed about how much they spread the word about La Mulita. Like to this day, today, I mean, people come in and they're like, oh, this friend of mine told me about this space so many times that I had to come and check it out. It's like constantly that we hear that. And that goes to show that the power of a community that is engaged, they're the ones who bring others to this place. And I can't thank them enough and my team. And I'm super grateful. So if there's something to focus on, is those two things, because that's what makes a real strong place for people to enjoy.
Yeah, that's so well said. One of the best pieces of business advice I ever received in a book came from this guy, Kevin Kelly. I forget what he does, but the advice sticks with me. Build 1,000 true fans. Don't focus on trying to get 1 million people to like your product. If you can focus on creating the best thing that 1,000 people will love, they'll take care of the rest. If they will ride or die for your product, they'll go out into the community. They will tell other people, their friends, their family. And in a world of algorithms, recommendations, we prioritize the word of mouth from a trusted source over any other form of recommendation. And so that goes so far. So that's my advice to anyone. Just focus on making 1,000 people extremely happy and you're good.
You're good. No, and that's so true. I see it all the time here. People come to me, it's like, Max, you've created a cult. La Mulita is like a cult. And it's not a cult. It's just what you just said is creating those fans that feel so excited to share what you're doing with others, that the way they express it to others, they want to come and check it out, or they want to be part of it. They're like, how am I missing on that? I want to be part of that too. And so they come and check it out and they hang out and they're like, oh yeah, that's true. Oh, let me tell someone else. And it just spreads over and over again. So to your point, just focus on a few and they're going to spread the word so much to so many people.
Now, I did want to discuss briefly just the coffee industry at large.
Yes.
I'm a coffee nerd. And so, I mean, the whole economy is broken, like the world is broken right now. And so every industry is getting affected and the coffee industry is no different. Can you explain what is going on and why prices in that industry are rising?
Yeah, I'm glad you give me this opportunity because that's something I want to relate to my community as well, because we're going to have to do some price increase in the very near future. And it's because of this crisis. So right now in the coffee industry, what's happening is that the top 3 producing countries in the world are Brazil, number 1, Vietnam, number 2, Colombia, number 3. Now, the number 1 and 2 had a very low harvest season. Brazil had a very low harvest season because they had a drought last year, which meant the coffee plants didn't produce as much coffee. Therefore, they reduced the supply. In Vietnam was a combination of weather, but also farmers deciding to switch crops from growing coffee to growing avocados and other crops that are more profitable to them. So when the number one and number 2 have a lower supply, what happens? Everyone else goes to after number 3, which is Colombia, and the rest of countries as well. Big companies like Illy, Starbucks, McDonald's, Dunkin' Donuts, those companies have to have huge contracts for a year ahead. And they went to a country like Colombia and tried to buy as much coffee as they could, which causes businesses like mine and medium-sized coffees to have to try to get coffee. But what happens is the supply is low and the demand is high, the price is going to go up. And so the prices have skyrocketed for everyone. No matter who you look at, we're all buying coffee at probably 35% more compared to last year. I bought my last purchase was in December, and the same coffee today is 35% more.
Wow.
And part of the reason I don't have my staple and most sold coffee in my lineup right now is because of that shortage.
Which one's that?
And it's called a Mule Kick and Stubborn Mule. Those are the 2 dark roasts that I sell every year. And because of this crisis, I won't be getting that until April. So I've had to replace it for another dark, and much of my community is devastated because of it, but there was no control over this crisis to get that coffee. So It is painful. And I know a lot of people are, trying to readjust, but let's put it this way. I don't think it'll be the last time we'll get through this. I think patterns will happen. Maybe next time is not Brazil, but maybe next time is Colombia. There's changes happening because of weather, government changes in different countries, farmers switching crops. And what you see every year grow is the demand for coffee.
Yeah, why is that? You told me that.
Yeah, coffee seems to be becoming a beverage among the younger population as a choice of drink, more so than before.
Right. And instead of soda.
It's soda and all that. And it seems like the younger generation is preferring to have coffee-based drinks, which was mostly older generations who would prefer coffee. Now the younger has jumped on board too.
Yeah.
So this demand has picked up tremendously. And a lot of businesses like mine have been popping all over the US. Mm-hmm. And that's providing a better coffee to all the different towns. And younger generation tend to gravitate to those businesses. So demand is high, supply is not as high. It's putting pressure on pricing. And so we're going to have bumpy road ahead. So we'll see. Maybe we're going to have to buy a coffee farm.
Wow. Okay, yeah. Let's bring a coffee farm to New Hampshire. We definitely have the conditions for it.
Yeah, exactly.
For the novice roaster and home brewer like myself, if I want to make a better cup of coffee tomorrow, now I alternate between my pour over and my French press. So these are my main two methods of home brewing, my dark roast black cups of coffee.
And pour over, what type of pour over?
I couldn't tell you.
Okay. And French press?
Couldn't tell you.
Okay.
Okay, so maybe this is a bad question, but what are the big things that home brewers like myself, or the amateur mistakes that we make, or what are the steps we can take to improve our cups of coffee at home immediately?
Great question, and one that I regularly get in this store. And I would start with two simple tips. One, if you have the possibility to have a place like ours grind your coffee in our coffee grinder, that would dramatically improve your experience at home. And I'm going to tell you why. And it's not a critic. You might have your coffee grinder at home, which I have one in my home, but I know my coffee grinder would not be as consistent in grinding the beans as my commercial grade grinder at the store. Why? Different technology, power, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, mine's like $5 from Walmart.
Exactly. And so that to start is a big component you could immediately change, and it doesn't cost you anything. You can come here and say, Max, can you grind me the coffee? And I'll do it for you. I bet you compare that grind to your grind, and your coffee being the same is going to be astronomically better with our grinder.
How different can it be? You're just crushing up a bean. What's the big difference?
You wouldn't think so, but it's the motor within the grinder and the burrs themselves, the type of burrs used on a commercial grade grinder. They cost $500 each, which are the burrs. And that is so precise in grinding your coffee, because coffee grinding is putting the bean and crushing it through two burrs that are rotating at high speed. Your home grinder is probably going to grind that bean as it's going through, not as consistent because of the power of the motor, the quality of the burrs. Is going to have some big grinds at the end, some medium size, and some small ones. The commercial one is probably going to grind them all at the percentage of medium across the board more consistently.
Okay, so you want the grounds to be uniform.
Okay. Exactly. That's the word. Uniform as much as you can.
Okay.
It's not going to be 100%, but the more you can get the uniformity higher, the better your extraction levels are going to be, more control and better. Because if you look at the sizes of grind, you could have big ones, rocks, mid-size, and sand. The sand is going to over-extract. The rocks are going to under-extract. The mediums are going to extract properly. So if you're grinding between big rocks and medium, you're going to be like not a proper flavor. So a proper grinder is the name of the game in better coffee. If you want to invest in something at home, put all your money in the grinder.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people say that. Now, my pushback to this is, and the reason why I never accept the offer to grind the beans at the coffee shop when I get the beans, is that the second you grind the beans, the freshness goes down. Correct. And by keeping the beans whole, you preserve it.
True. That is true. So the response I would say to that, the freshness is related to the aromas. Aromas is what you smell. Mm-hmm. Okay. So you might be losing on the smell, but on the flavor, you're going to make it better. So
got it.
The degrading portion of the coffee that goes faster is the smell of the coffee, the aroma, by grinding it here and drinking it a week after, 2 weeks or 3 weeks.
Okay.
But the taste is going to be better.
Gotcha.
Okay? So you got to trade some for others. Now, if you want both, you invest in a better grinder or grind manually, but not everyone wants to wake up and grind manually.
Yeah. For a bean that costs so little, everything around it costs so much.
It's so true. It's like one of the questions that my wife keeps asking me is like, how much do we have to invest just for a nice cup of coffee? So much money. And it's so true. But to be honest, that's why I like to say to people, rely on the service of someone local that has a proper grinder. And hey, you won't be smelling it, the aroma as fresh as you could by grinding it home, but you might get a really good cup of coffee every morning. Okay. Really consistent.
Okay.
So trade one for the other.
This is very good to know. Thank you for the education there. Max, I think I am out of questions for you.
Got it.
So with that, we have one final question, and we ask this same final question at the end of every episode every week. And I will ask it to you.
Oh boy.
Max, knowing everything that you know now in hindsight about how things have panned out for you here in Rye, New Hampshire with your business, La Mulita, what advice would you give to your 22-year-old self?
That's an excellent question. I would say, I think all of us have two voices inside of us. One that is positive, go for it, you can do it. The other one is like, no, it's too risky, don't do it. Keep conservative, don't take those challenges. I think that when I was a 20-year-old, I was listening too much to that conservative, risk-averse person, and I didn't let the other voice shut that down and say, go for it. Be true to yourself. Follow your dream. It might be a bumpy road, but if you follow that you dream of and that you feel happy to do, you'll make it. So I kept with the risk-averse voice for a long time, from when I was 20 and up till late in the game. To be honest, I consider myself a late bloom entrepreneur because I did it in a phase where, I was probably in my 40s. I mean, I did some real estate, don't take me wrong, but this coffee business, I could have started much, much earlier. And probably, I hadn't met George Howell at the time, but my point is, listen to your inner voice. Those two voices you have, listen to the positive one, to the one that's trying to guide you to do the things you enjoy, that you can dream about. Listen to that voice more than the other one. Sometimes the other one is useful, but not as much as the positive one. So that's my 2 cents on it.
That's Max Pruna of La Mulita Coffee in Rye. To support Max, who is truly one of the nicest people on the Seacoast, you can pay him a visit at 15 Sagamore Road, Monday through Saturday from 7:30 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. You can also visit lamulitacoffee.com to purchase beans for the coffee lover in your life. And while you're at it, please tell said friend to listen to this episode. Like Max and I said, word of mouth is everything. That's it for today, but I do thank you so much for listening. And if you see me around town this week, perhaps at Golden Harvest, Two Bees, or Stoneface Brewing, then please stop me and say hi. I would love to hear your story. Until next Monday, everybody, have a great week. Live free or die.